Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com, and welcome to this second video in my new 2022 Intro to Typescript and Javascript course. I'm going to take a quick sip of coffee. And let's get started. So now you should have all set up. So again, you should have Deno, Node installed, you should have VS Code installed, and you should be kind of in a situation looking like my screen here. If you don't know how I got to this point, do watch the very first video in the series, video number 1, and where I'll walk through the whole setup. Now, what you're going to want to do is create two files. So here I have this folder open. I'm going to create two files. We're going to call this, I will call this hello world.js, because JS is the file extension. So anytime you have like a dot something at the end of the file, that's called a file extension. And that allows like different programs to kind of know like, okay, this file belongs to this program or that program. So see, by adding the .js extension, VS Code notices that this particular, because at the end they're just text files, this text file is a JavaScript file. And if I do another one, I say hello world.ts, that's going to be a TypeScript file. So you see it picks up on the differences and gives me the little icons here. Cool. Okay, and then I'm just going to make this text a little bit bigger so that way you can see it better. Appearance, zoom in. There we go. Okay, so we're going to write the simplest thing first. Okay, so in JavaScript, the first thing you want to learn whenever you learn any language is just how to tell it to print text to the terminal. The reason being is that otherwise the program's just going to run and you're going to have no idea what it did. So sometimes you're going to want to say, print out this text so that way I know that you actually did the thing. Because it's code, the things you tell the computer to do aren't inherently visual. So I'm going to say console. The console is an object in JavaScript. You're going to notice there's several built-in objects in JavaScript that we can refer to. And console is referring to this terminal window. Okay, this terminal window. So whenever we say console, it means, hey, I want to do something and send something to this terminal window. Now, VS Code is very helpful because a lot of times these objects that we work with have a lot of built-in things and it's impossible to memorize all of them. But the way we generally access something inside of an object is we put a dot after the name. So notice the minute I put a dot after the word console, VS Code gives me this list, and this gives me a list of everything that's inside of the console object. The thing that we really care about right now is log, okay, because we want to log something to the console. We want to put some text on the console. So console.log. And what we want to log is some words. Now, any type of text that you want to think of as text in code is called a string. And it's always going to be surrounded by quotation marks. So I want to say hello world. Okay, hello world. So again, strings always have quotation marks. That's what's going to tell the interpreter that this is not just like a variable name or a name of a function. This is actually like just text. Doesn't have to be double quotes, could be single quotes, could also be backticks. And if you don't know what a backtick is, it's that single quote looking thing that should be right above your tab key. And that's it, console.log. So what this program has one direction. We want to run this function log, which what it does is it's going to take whatever we put in the parentheses and puts it over here in the terminal. Okay, this is what's referred, so console is an object and log is a function. And a function is something that does something. Okay, so like think of it as like a direction. So I'm saying, hey, log, and then generally after a function gets parentheses, and I'm able to give things to the function that it can use to do things. So in this case, I'm giving it the string of hello world so it can put it on the screen down here. Okay, so let's run that file. So to run the file using Node, I would just type in the Node command, and then after it, the name of the file. Now, keep in mind, my terminal has to be in the same folder. So when you're looking at your terminal, type pwd. This stands for print working directory. So you see, is this the folder? Yep, that's the right folder. So currently my terminal is inside the right folder. This is one of the benefits of using VS Code. If you're open VS Code to the right folder, and then you open up the terminal, it should automatically already be in that folder, and you don't have to worry about going up and down folders. Otherwise, you'd have to use like the cd command, which means change directories to change folders. And what I recommend if you need to do that, for some reason you don't want to open up the folder in VS Code, go watch my Intro to Bash video where I go over all those commands. Okay, that's Intro to Bash. So just look up Intro to Bash. Okay, but I'm going to just type in node hello world.js. And the nice thing about terminal is that if I can type in most of the file name, I can hit tab and it'll finish the rest of it for me. But again, it doesn't know whether I'm talking about the JS file or the TS file, so I got to type in the last two letters. So node hello world.js, I hit enter, and it does exactly what I told it to do. I gave it one direction. I said, hey, log hello world to the terminal, and that's what the program did. Now, easily enough in Typescript, because again, Typescript is really just JavaScript at the end of the day, it's going to be the same thing. Console.log hello world. Okay, and then when we type hello world, what we're going to do is instead of using node, we'll use Deno. We'll just say Deno hello world.ts. Okay. Oh no, it's Deno run. Been a while. Deno run hello world.ts. So Deno is not just Deno something. You have to do Deno run. You're telling Deno to run the file hello world.ts. And you see it runs the file. And we get hello world.ts. Okay, and that's the nice thing about Deno, because otherwise in Node we could run TypeScript files, but we'd have to go like do this whole discussion about how do you install libraries and set up a compiler. And with Deno we can just run the TypeScript file. We can just focus on learning TypeScript and introduce those other complexities at a later point. And that's it. You've just learned how to, you've just created your first script in two different languages, a TypeScript file and JavaScript file. They look exactly the same, but technically you ran one with as a TypeScript file, you ran the other as a JavaScript file. So that's always the first thing you want to learn. The next thing you want to learn is how to declare variables. Okay, in JavaScript, it's pretty straightforward. Okay, there are two ways to describe. You're always going to use the word let and constant. It's going to be the same thing in TypeScript. Okay, so first thing to show you is how to write a comment. So if you do 2 slashes, anything you write after it gets ignored. This is going to allow you to write notes in your code. Okay, I highly recommend doing this a lot, especially when you're a new programmer, to write a lot of little messages to yourself about what your code is doing. So I might go back up here and say, hey, you know, this will print text to the console. Okay, and now we're going to say, hey, we're going to declare a variable with let. Okay, and what I can do here is I would use the word let, meaning, hey, I want to create the new variable. So whenever you see the word let, it means, hey, I'm making a new variable. You're never referring to a previously existing one. You're creating a new variable. You're declaring it. Then you give the variable a name. We'll say a number. And then we're going to say equals. Equals doesn't mean like, are they the same? It means this thing is going to be this from now going forward. So we're going to say, hey, this variable that we just created, number, is going to equal whatever's after the equal sign going forward. So we're going to say like the number 4. Okay, and just to make sure that it actually is the number 4, we'll do console.log and we'll console log the variable number. So I'm going to give console log the variable number, and what it's going to do, it's not going to log the word number because it's not a string. Since it has no quotations, it's a variable. And it's going to log whatever value that variable has. In this case, we gave it the value of 4. Okay, so when I do that, now if I run node hello world.js, see I get the number 4. Now what's special about let variables, okay, is that they can be changed. So now that I've created the variable and it's a let, I'm allowed to reassign it. So I can now say, hey, going forward, number is going to be 5. Then if I console.log number again, okay, I get 5. See, the first time it's 4, the second time it's 5. Even though I'm logging the same variable, the values change. I've reassigned the value, okay? Because that's essentially what you're doing. You're taking, hey, this is the label. I'm going to assign it this value, and then I'm reassigning it a value. So whenever you use the let keyword to create a variable, that variable can be changed. You actually be surprised that you rarely ever really need to change variables, because oftentimes you're not, you'll see that a lot of times you're going to have your variables or your data in objects and arrays, or which things we haven't discussed yet, which you won't necessarily need to use the let keyword. So you'll be surprised you'll actually use this keyword not that often. And just as a side note, there is another way of defining a reassignable variable called var. That's sort of an older way of doing it that I would just completely avoid. Okay, you should be aware that var exists, and when you see older JavaScript code, you'll see var for variable. But if you're programming new JavaScript code in 2022, to the extent that you can help it, you should be just using let and following const. And const should be your default. Okay, generally you want your code to be less flexible. Okay, because not every variable needs to change values. So don't assume that it does. So you want to declare as a const, which means constant, which means the variable cannot be updated, not be reassigned. That way, if somewhere the variable changes unexpectedly, you'll get an error and you can catch that bug. Otherwise, if you just declare everything with let, you might have variables changing values that you don't want to change values, but the code won't throw an error because you told that it can change values. So again, it's easier for me, the programmer, to make things more flexible up front, but then it's more painful later on in the bugs. And that's going to be the reason why we like using Typescript. Okay, that's going to be sort of, and you'll see how we'll tighten that up even more with Typescript. Okay, but I will say const. We'll say, in this case, we'll use a different type of variable. So we'll say const Boolean, or we'll just say const bool. Okay, now bool. Yeah, we'll say bool. Okay, now a Boolean is a special type of variable. So again, there's different types of data. So we've seen 3 so far. We've seen strings. Strings are quotation marks. They tell us that these are words. Just a straight up number. Okay, so in JavaScript, to keep it simple, whether a number has a decimal or not a decimal, it's still a number. There's not really a distinction between decimals and no decimals. In other languages, numbers without decimals, whole numbers, are integers, and numbers with decimals could either be a float or long, depending on how big they are and how many spaces there are. But JavaScript keeps it simple. Now, a Boolean is a type of variable that has 2 possible values, true or false. And so they're essentially like light switches. And the reason you use Booleans is because there's going to be a lot of times in our code where we want something to happen if something's true or if something is false, or we just need a switch that can toggle between 2 different values. So Booleans are going to be sort of our nice little light switches when we just need a sort of an on and off switch. Okay, so bool has 2 values. So I create this variable bool, and then we'll console log it to make sure that it's what we think it is. And notice I wrote true without quotation marks, because true is its own thing. It's its own value in JavaScript. It's not a string. If I pass a string of true and put quotation marks around it, I might cause issues and errors in my code. That's where Typescript, again, is going to help us prevent those kind of bugs. Okay, so console.log, we'll console.log bool. Okay, and let's try that out. And you'll see when I run node hello world.js, see I get the log of true. Now let's see what happens if I try to reassign it. So I'll say bool equals false. That's the other value. Okay, now I'm going to get an error. And see, when you get a JavaScript error, notice you get all this output. Okay, generally this output right here, not going to be really useful when you're a new programmer. Okay, this is referred to as the stack trace. And what it's really just doing is giving you the chain of things that went wrong. Because, so this is like where it actually went wrong, the first line, and that triggers something to go wrong here, and then here, and here, and here. So all you really care about is this line right here, where it's going to say like a type of error. And then you care about here where it actually kind of points to where in the code the error is. So see, it says here, it says, oh, the error is in line 13. Okay, see, line 13. So here's where, so that's line 13 right there. So this is where the code error is. And then it tells us right here what the code error is, assignment to a constant variable. Oh, that's right, because we declared Boolean as a constant variable. So when I try to assign it a new value, that's like, hey, you told me you can't do that, so it gave me an error. That's not a bad thing. Errors are your friend. You prefer that when things don't go right in your code that you get errors, because the worst thing that can happen is that when something goes wrong in your code, you don't get an error. And then you have no idea how to fix it. Okay? So we want errors, which is again why we like TypeScript. So let's switch over to TypeScript. So in this case, it's generally going to be the same thing. Okay, I can make comments using double slashes. So again, let's declare variables with a let. Except now when I do this, I want to say let number. What you want to do is what's called typing. You want to tell the code this is the type of variable that you're going to do. You can't do this in normal JavaScript. So I would say this is a number. Okay, and then we'll say, you know, the number is 5. Okay. Oh, okay. Wait a second. I don't think I can call it number because I think number is already used in TypeScript. So I have to be like let num. And then I got to tell you what type it is, and I think it's just lowercase number. Okay. And then I can say 5. Okay. Now notice that this piece right here, this is what's referred to as typing. What I'm doing is I'm saying, hey, I'm creating this new variable, but not only am I creating this new variable, I'm actually telling you what this variable should be. I'm telling you it should be a number. Okay. So now TypeScript knows that this should be a number, and since the Visual Studio Code leverages TypeScript, it can actually tell us if something is wrong. So for example, if I put quotation marks around the 5, I'm going to get an error. So you see here it says type string is not assignable to a type error. And the reason why I get these like red lines here is because of an extension called ErrorLens. You probably won't be seeing that unless you have ErrorLens installed, which ErrorLens can be really useful sometimes. Sometimes it can be kind of annoying. But I will, you know, I will at least get this little red squiggly line, and I can hover above the red squiggly line, and if you're not using ErrorLens, it should give you some more detail. Okay, but the beauty of that is like that wouldn't have happened in normal JavaScript. So I would have accidentally assigned a string to my variable and probably wouldn't have noticed until there was other problems down the line. But since I was able to tell the code, this is what I'm trying to do, it can tell me if I'm not doing it. So that's the beauty of typing. So at first, like that's pretty nice. Like it allows like you to catch those bugs before you even ever really run the file, because now your IDE knows what you're trying to do. Your IDE being your editor, and it can say, "Hey, Alex, you're messing up." But otherwise, it works the same. So I can then console.log num, and then I can then reassign num. So I'll say num equals 6. And then console.log num again, because again, num is reassignable. So then if I run that, Deno run hello world.ts, and I get the 5 and the 6. Okay, cool. And then I can do it again. Over here, we'll declare variables with a const. So I'll say const bool. Okay. And then I have to give it a type, Boolean. Okay. And then I'll say true. Okay, I guess bool is also a built-in type. So we'll say my Boolean. Okay. So const my Boolean. And then since I type this Boolean, it's like, yeah, this is a Boolean. But now watch what happens if I put quotation marks around this. Because a lot of people make that mistake. They keep putting quotation marks around true when they really just meant the value of true. Like now, TypeScript will tell me the error. Hey, Alex, that's a string, not a Boolean. Oh, yeah, I need to go take off the quotation marks. Nice. Okay, and that's the beauty of TypeScript. So see, TypeScript isn't really changing a lot of what JavaScript is doing, but it's giving you the ability to interject a little bit more discipline so that way you make less mistakes, long as you take advantage of typing. Okay, but what if you get really frustrated because types do get more complicated, and I'm like, I just don't want to deal with this error. There is an escape hatch called any, where I can just type in any as a type, which means anything. Generally, you want to avoid that. It's bad practice to use any too much. There are times where just like the thing you're trying to do gets so complicated to define the correct type for, that you will then want to use any as your escape hatch. But let's just see here. So true. Let's go back to Boolean. Okay. But now let's do this. So const, and then again I can console.log my Boolean. And then I can try to reassign it. My Boolean equals false. And so even though I'm assigning it a Boolean, I'm still getting an error because, again, my Boolean is a constant variable because I declared it with const. Okay. So now when I run the code, Deno run hello world ts. See, I'm going to get that error. Okay, can I assign my Boolean? And see, the TypeScript errors are going to look a little bit neater. Okay, so you see it like a little bit less verbose, a little bit more straight to the point, because it's not, the JavaScript never actually got run. Remember, there's two steps with TypeScript. First, the TypeScript has to turn the JavaScript successfully, and then the JavaScript gets run. So I'm not going to see a JavaScript error because the TypeScript file never compiled. And generally, you shouldn't see any runtime errors, theoretically, because if you take advantage of TypeScript well, your code's never going to compile until it's going to run okay. And that's going to get rid of any kind of error. Well, and when I say run okay, I mean in the sense that you're not going to get any kind of runtime errors. You might get other problems, like you might just have given the wrong direction, so your code doesn't do what you want to do. That's called like a logical error, where your code's behaving wrong because the logic is wrong. So you gave bad directions. So I told you to make me a peanut butter jelly sandwich with mayo by accident. So you brought me back a mayo and jelly sandwich, even though I wanted a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And I'm like, oh, that's wrong. But technically, you did the directions I'm trying to give you. Or you did the directions I gave you. I just gave you the wrong directions. Like, that's a logical error. Okay. A type error is just when we make silly mistakes in our code, and I, use a number in the wrong place or a string in the wrong place. TypeScript's going to help us catch all that. Okay, and prevent us from having a lot of those kind of issues. Cool. Okay, but now let's get rid of that, and let's see how we're doing on time. So I think that's going to be kind of it for this video. But hopefully this is gonna, again, this series is really meant for going from like 0. So I'm assuming like sort of like you've never coded before, and this is your initial exposure to JavaScript. So I'm going to be explaining things sort of very slowly in this set of videos. I do have other JavaScript videos where I do explain things in a sort of a bit of a quicker pace. So if you do have some experience with JavaScript and TypeScript and just kind of want to like explore some JavaScript features, look up my masterclass videos. You'll see, like, just look up Alex Merced masterclass and you'll find all those videos. Those videos are going to just dive right into the topics that they cover. But with that, I'll see you all in the next video. Have a great day and enjoy.